Hello and welcome to A Little Crafting. My name is Annie and I am recording this from Surrey, where I live in the UK. This is my bi-weekly podcast where I talk about all the things that I've been making, mostly knitting and sometimes weaving, sewing and yarn dyeing as well, or any other crafty thing that I choose to pick up in between weeks. You can find me on Instagram as a_little_crafting or on Ravelry as Ankiwoo. And today is Sunday the 24th of October. So it's been a couple of weeks since I recorded, but I have a lot to share with you today. So first of all, let's start with what I'm wearing, and this is my Georgetown cardigan by Fettig. It is one of my favourite jumpers that I've ever knit. I wear it all the time in the winter. It tends to sit on the back of my work chair and then I will put it on if I get cold. It has a shawl collar, which I absolutely love, and it is knit in Aran weight yarn. This yarn is Dererum Natura Gilliatt in the Poivre Blanc colourway. Again, one of my absolute favourite yarns as well. I have been wearing this a lot, so I guess it's gonna get quite worn and quite pilled from wearing it so much, but I do still really like it. So the shawl collar actually doesn't sit kind of out, but I don't really mind that. I quite like having this little collar section there, and it's quite long on me, so yeah, it goes kind of further down, but an absolute great staple in terms of wanting to keep cozy in the winter. It's so lovely and warm, and it's just my comfort cardigan, as just something that I can throw on top of anything and just feel nice and cozy and warm in. I do love the shawl collar. It does take a bit of time to do. Obviously you're picking up stitches all the way around the cardigan and then knitting a rib outwards. So I think actually, in terms of working out the differences, I probably spent half of the time knitting the jumper, knitting the shawl collar, just because it's quite slow, but it is worth it in the end because you get this lovely cozy effect and an absolutely lovely cardigan at the end of it. So highly recommend the pattern. I will wear this all the time, and I'm probably going to have to knit another one because at some point it will wear out and I'll want one in a different colour or something like that. But yeah, really happy with this make. Whilst it's I guess not my favourite make, it is definitely the one that is most worn because it, you know, I can just be sitting at home and go, I'm cold, I'll just grab my cardigan, and this is what I go to when I'm feeling like that. So yeah, I love it as a wardrobe staple. Moving on to finished objects, and I do have a finished object this week, hurrah! So I'm back on the hat game, but I have only finished one, and that's because it is this gorgeous hat, and this is a pattern by Maxim. It is the Hat and Peak hat, and it is knit in sport weight yarn. So this one I've actually chosen to use leftovers of Dererum Natura Ulysse, which is a sport weight yarn equivalent to the Gilliatt but in a finer yarn. And this one I've knit in, so I think this colour is Poivre, which is a more browny colour than my cardigan. This one, the kind of tealy green one, is Plume. The gold is Doré, and the top colour is again not quite the same as my sweater. It's Boulot, I think, which is a kind of off-white colour with some specks of sort of grey in there, making up this lovely crown. I absolutely sped through this considering it is fingering weight yarn and it has a double brim as well. But I really enjoyed knitting it, as I do with most colourwork designs. I just thought it was a really great pattern when it was released, and last weekend I decided that I needed to knit a hat and I wanted to knit something like this. So I grabbed my leftovers, chose a few colours and went for it. And it was absolutely lovely. I think I ended up finishing it in 3 days, so that's pretty quick considering. But yeah, it needs a block still, but I'm hoping it will be a really nice hat for someone to keep their ears warm during the winter. The hat and peak hat is kind of a sister pattern of the hide and peak sweater that I have also purchased from Maxim, where it has this same colourwork design all across a yoked sweater. I will probably at some point knit that for my husband, but at the moment I've just done the hat, and to be honest I can imagine the sweater would be pretty quick as well, just because I'm totally addicted to knitting colourwork and it just keeps me going constantly, especially when you're changing colours so often like you are in this design. So highly recommend it if you're looking for a hat pattern. It is a paid for pattern, but definitely worth it if you want something a bit more interesting to use up some of those leftovers that you've got. And there we go, one finished object. Now I don't have any other FOs, even though I'd normally be knitting 2 hats in 2 weeks, just because I've had a bit of cast-on-itis, as in I've cast on a couple of things and got a bit obsessed with knitting those instead. So I'll move on to works in progress and start off with my husband's sweater. So it is being kept in my lovely Antler and Acorn bag, jungle themed with my lion on it, and I'll link that in the description below so you can go and check out her bags on Etsy. So I am knitting the Cotswold Henley by Meghan Babin, and I'm knitting it out of the same yarn as I am currently wearing in my sweater, but in a different colour. So this is Dererum Natura Gilliatt, seam in there, and the colourway is, let me double check, Cèdre, which is this lovely mottled green. Blowing out a little bit, there we go, see it there. So it's nicely textured, and yeah, I've got quite a few balls of this for his sweater, but I will show you where I am at the moment. So the Cotswold Henley is quite a classic Henley sweater, so it's got the kind of v-neck with a bit of a collar and buttons to do up if you want to. So I did buy some buttons, which are going to be these ones, from a garden centre near me. And so far all I have done is the tubular cast on and a couple of rows, and I'm dropping stitch markers, not going so well, just put that on there. So this pattern calls for a tubular cast on, and it has quite interesting instructions for that, I would say. So I had a little go and failed, had another go, and then decided to just YouTube a tubular cast on and do that. Lots of people in the project notes on Ravelry are saying that the tubular cast on is worth it for the look. I'm not sure the amount of time that I spent on this week makes it worthwhile. But yeah, it does make a nice edge, I suppose. So let me see if I can show you here. There you go. It makes quite a nice edge on the sweater, but I'm not sure it's that necessary. So the video that I ended up using, I'll link in the description below as well. And it was for a 2x2 tubular cast on. Basically what I ended up doing was ignoring the start of the pattern, using the video, and then carrying on with the pattern after that. So yeah, I have a tubular cast on. It took me a long time, partly because my elbow was hurting at some point because of climbing, also because I kept trying to do it in the evening when I was tired. So next time I'll know what I'm doing, I'll know to follow that video, and it will be much quicker, I hope. But either way, I'm so happy that I'm underway with this project after a couple of weeks. So the first hurdle was that I couldn't find my 3.5mm needles, so I had to order some more. Went through all my project bags and could not find them. So I picked some up, had to wait for those to be delivered. Then we were out on the day that they were delivered, so we had to book a redelivery, and they didn't turn up again for another 4 days after I'd booked the redelivery. So thank you so much, postal service, for being efficient, but that was annoying. Obviously that's totally first world problems, and I appreciate everything, and you know, the fact that my family are healthy and happy and that we have all of these things available. And to be honest, out of everything that's important, me casting on a sweater is not that important, but it's still frustrating when I was so eager to get going. So I'm underway. I will have way more progress for you next week to share. But I'm really hoping this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful sweater for my husband. I've now learned a tubular cast on, which I didn't know about before. So win-win, I suppose. And I'll see how it goes over the next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to the textured part. So part of why I chose this particular sweater to knit for my husband was that there's lots of texture, which is really interesting to knit rather than it just being a plain stitch. And I'm actually very drawn to some of Maximus's other patterns. I think he's just released a new sweater which has a lot of texture over it, because there's not that many sweaters that are designed for men or modelled on men. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a design that is made for men, but it would be great to be able to knit more sweaters for men, even if they're kind of unisex. I find it really hard to tell whether a sweater is going to suit someone like my husband rather than, you know, a female model that it's being shown in. I don't know if that's something that pattern designers could consider, is that if it's a unisex sweater, so if it's not necessarily exclusively for women, so for example it doesn't have bust shaping or anything like that, that they could actually model it on a man as well, so that you could actually see how it fits the male torso, to get a better idea, just because I think there aren't that many. I'm sure there are a lot more traditional patterns for men, but there's so many patterns being released now that are designed for women, because, you know, I guess the idea is that they knit for themselves, that seems to be a bit of a gap in the market, which Max is definitely filling at the moment, because I keep seeing his new sweater patterns and going, I'm buying that, because that would look great on my husband. So I'll be knitting a few more sweaters, I think, assuming this goes well. I hope the rest of the pattern is a bit easier to follow than the explanation of how to do a tubular cast on, but we shall see. I'll let you know in the next episode. Yeah, excited to see how this colour looks on my husband too. So that is one cast on for the week, but I mentioned I cast on a couple of things, and the next one is something that I've had planned for a little while. I dyed my own yarn for this project, and it is the Hummingbird shawl by Fibre Tales. So I will show you where I am at the moment, and what drew me to this pattern was the little bee designs that I've just finished knitting. Essentially this is going to be for a friend of mine who keeps her own bees, and I thought it would be great to knit her a bee shawl, but I've also hand dyed some gold yarn to kind of emulate the honey colour. So let me show you the little beads. Don't they look cute? It's so adorable to have those little bees as a design on the shawl. So it's a triangular shawl, and you actually start from the outer edge. So you start with the longest section and you work inwards, I guess. So if you picture a triangle, you work inwards. So I started with, I think, 340 or 360 stitches on my needles, and I'm decreasing down, which is actually, I think, a good way of doing it, because you don't suddenly get to the last few rows and go, oh god, this is taking ages. you probably get to the last few rows and go, oh, this is great, this has been quick. So yeah, I really am happy with this section here that I've been working on so far. So it's got these kind of little mountainous triangle bits, zigzag bits, and then the bees above. And yeah, I'm really happy with the yarn. This yarn is non-superwash merino DK, which I bought from yarnundyed.net, which is AC Woods. And I dyed this in my gold colour, but this was the set of skeins that I had the accident with the green. You can see there is still a bit of a tinge of green in the yarn. But what I will maybe do is, if I finish off the shawl and I think it is too green, I'll over dye it with a little bit of orange, just to kind of take it more towards the orange level again. If you look at this skein here, this is what the colour should look like. So you can see it's much more green than this. So I'll see how it turns out. I'm loving the variation though, and this is one of this is essentially the first project that I'm making with my own hand dyed yarn, so so I'm excited. But let me see if I can show you, maybe on this section here. You can see there's some colour variation between sort of gold and sort of a rust colour, and then it kind of changes in tone. Which I think looks really lovely. So I'm definitely enjoying it. I love this base as well. It's really soft, but it's non-superwash, and it's merino. It must be spun in quite a round way. I can't remember which one's which between worsted spun and woolen spun, so I double check. But the one way makes it quite a fluffy yarn that sticks together well, and the other way makes it quite rounded. So this is quite rounded, which actually makes it really good for the textures and the little bees. So I'm loving this project. The next section has some little flower detail, and then I think it's pretty much all stockinette or garter all the way. So yeah, I'm speeding on with this project, considering, okay, I haven't done that many rows, but they've been very long ones, and it has just kept me going. I cast this on, what, a week ago or a bit more than that? And yeah, I might end up knitting another one of these for someone else or myself, depending on how it turns out at the end, and especially because it gives me reason to dye more yarn in this lovely base that I think I'll be using a lot more of in future. I am knitting this on 3.25mm needles, and using my higher sharp interchangeable set, and the cable length is probably a bit short, but so it's scrunching up a little bit, but it still is giving me a lot of joy to knit. So I highly recommend the pattern. It is lovely, and I'll have a finished object to show you at some point. Yeah, so I'll just pop this back over here. Oh, there we go. And I hope my friend will also really like it once it's done. Right, so next up, I'm just quickly going to show you my staff blanket, which I, again, have not done much on, but I've done a couple of rows, I suppose, so I'm gonna show you every time. Maybe do sort of a once a month update, so once every other podcast episode. So yeah, I'm still on the same section. I'm on the third garter ridge, but yeah, it's looking good. I'm still enjoying it, but again, still being patient with myself with it. I think this will take a very long time to finish. I really need to get some longer cords for my needles because it's all scrunched up. so I might have to order about 4 of them just to keep going. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, it's going well. That's pretty much all I have to say. I really like the look of it. The yarn is lovely and soft. My cat has not yet decided to sit on top of it whilst I'm knitting it, so I'm not sure if it, you know, meets the cat appreciation softness level yet, but we'll see once it gets bigger, and maybe once it's kind of out she'll go and sit on it, but we'll see about that. I am knitting this in Ramble, which is a Willow and Lark DK weight merino yarn, and this is exclusive to Love Crafts, so I bought a whole load in these colours about a year ago, more than that probably, to knit this for my husband and I. It will, when it's finished, have pride of place in our lounge, which has these kind of colours. It actually has a burnt orange and a turquoise on the throw cushions, so I thought it'd be great to match those with my blanket as well. Moving on to what I have been sewing, and I mentioned last time that I had finished one quilt and was about to be starting another one. So I have started my Peter Rabbit quilt. This is for another colleague who has a baby on the way, and I'm just going to be doing squares, but in a kind of diamond detail shape. So I've just joined them up mostly first of all, but I do really like the colours together, the kind of pink and the yellow and white, and there's a Peter there. So I'm just joining up strips for now, but what I'll have, I think I've got 2 more to do like this, so to join up the squares, and then I will work vertically instead of horizontally, or sorry, horizontally rather than vertically, to join all of them up, and then I'll do a border. And I'll probably do something similar to my other one where I had sort of a thin border in one colour within the white edge. So yeah, enjoying that, and I'll be backing it with some pink fabric as well. But yeah, I've got until I think mid-November probably. So I'll get cracking now and hopefully have a finished object to show you next time on that front. I am still finding it quite relaxing, so eager to carry on with this little project and make some more baby blankets in future, or even real sized quilts, maybe larger human sized quilts, although I imagine I'll feel a bit short on space whilst making those, but we shall see. I might get bored of it, you never know. But yeah, otherwise quite enjoying this. Definitely getting quicker at sewing straight lines, definitely getting quicker in general at cutting as well, which is something I wanted to achieve with these projects too. One day I'll get on to actually making clothes. So I did have a friend of mine ask that recently, whether I did make my own clothes as well, but not quite yet. It's something that I wanted a bit more practice before sewing to that extent. Moving on to some other things that I've been doing. So I did have a yarn dyeing session a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to show you the results. So the first one, this is once again the undyed merino DK. This was my first accident with the green. So this was a gold, but again it went to green, but more so than the skeins that I'm using to knit the Hummingbird shawl. So what I wanted to do was over dye the kind of orangey, khaki, yellowy colour with some blue to make it a really nice green, and that's exactly what I've ended up with. So I used a cobalt blue jacquard acid dye to just over dye on top of these and make this wonderful foresty green. But again, it's got the variation in there, so if you see here you've got a bit of yellow going on, but you also have some bluer bits. So for example, I don't know if you can see very well, you've got some bluer bits sort of interspersed as well, which I am starting to really love. I'm starting to really love this about hand-dyed yarn, especially when I'm doing it myself. So yeah, this green is gorgeous. I'm really disappointed that I can't recreate it, because ultimately it's a botched yarn then over dyed with another colour, so recreating the original will be tricky, but I might see if I can, just because I love it so much. It's this really lovely foresty green, and I like the way that this yarn, although it's non-superwash, is actually still quite shiny and vivid, and I think it might be the acid dyes that do that. But yeah, love the way these have turned out, so I'll probably knit myself something with this. Yeah, really like them, and pleased to actually have an end result that I like from something that went totally wrong. So yeah, really happy with how those ended up. The other thing that I did was a little experiment, which, because I like doing those, obviously. So I dyed 3 different bases with the same colour. And this I will show you on the Superwash Merino first, is my copper colourway. It is not as orange as it's coming up on screen. It's much more kind of browny copper than it's showing up. And this will be the brightest version. So this is a Superwash Merino mini skein. I think it's a 75/25 merino nylon actually. And you get a very vivid colour with that one. The second one that I dyed, surprise surprise, is the non-superwash DK merino that I used for the shawl, and also the green skeins that I'm knitting, or that I over dyed. So you can see it's slightly different. So this one, the mini skein, is more vivid than this one. Again, it's kind of coming out a lot more orange than it actually is on screen, so hopefully you can picture it in your minds. And then the last one that I dyed is a blue-faced Leicester fleece DK, which is from West Yorkshire Spinners. And this was a very brown yarn. And this is the same, exactly the same dye bath, exactly the same colourway, and it's much more mottled and kind of muted because of the brown base on it. So yeah, let me show you all 3, and what I will also do is insert a picture of the 3 of them together, because I think it will show better on a photograph than it does on the screen here. So yeah, they're all 3 of my hand-dyed yarns. So yeah, I love the middle one. Again, surprise surprise, considering I've been talking about how much I love this yarn already. This is absolutely beautiful. This is also lovely, but I'm trying not to use so much superwash yarn anymore, and something non-superwash that comes out in this wonderful colour is fantastic. And then really interesting, so like the stark difference. Both of these are non-superwash yarns. This one's a BFL brown base, and this one's a merino white base. So yeah, really interesting to see the differences. I love the variation on this one as well. So yeah, really nice little experiment there. Show you all those at the end. And I will probably be using these 2 for something for myself. So this one might be an accessory and this one might be a hat or something, but we shall see. Obviously this is a mini skein, so it might end up as heels in a sock or something like that, but I definitely need to dye more of this colourway. I know I spent a long time trying to find a burnt orange colour. This ended up being more brown than I wanted, but it's still absolutely beautiful and definitely hits me in the right place. So yeah, loving it. We'll be dyeing more of that again. I might end up with a sweater's quantity at some point, you never know. So yeah, loving that. lastly, I want to talk about some acquisitions. So the first thing I ordered the other day via a friend was some Pluto Lopi, and if you've ever seen Pluto Lopi, it is essentially unspun yarn in these sort of discs, essentially plates, I think they're called. So if you have a look at that, let's see if I can make it show. So yeah, whereas normal yarn you'd have a ply of some kind, this is not plied. But I am planning on knitting the Althea, I think, sweater by Jennifer Steingass, and she used Pluto Lopi for her sample, so I thought actually I'd like to really try this yarn and see what it's like. It's very similar to the Newterdon yarn, but I believe it's a finer yarn, so it's more like sport weight rather than a DK to Aran. And I am going to knit my sweater. So the colour work is going to be in this, and the body of the sweater will be in the light grey, which is exactly the same colour as she used in her sample. So I will pop that picture there. It's actually going to be my Christmas jumper. I know, not massively Christmassy, but I don't like a Christmas jumper that kind of overdoes Christmas, especially because I have some winter jumpers that could pass for Christmas jumpers already. I want to be able to wear it more often than just Christmas. So yeah, those two colours are going to be the colours for that. I will probably cast on at some point soon because I need to have finished it by Christmas. So planning on casting on maybe in the next couple of weeks. So I will therefore have a bit to show you and give you a bit of a review maybe on how this Pluto Lopi is knitting up. It is 100% wool, pure new wool from Iceland. Yeah, made from Icelandic wool. And in 100 grams you've got 300 meters, so yeah, I think it's about a sport weight. Unspun wool, soft and airy, and it should knit together, I guess, like connect together really, really nicely, which is why Jennifer Steingass used it for that sweater in the first place. It's taken me a while to get some of this yarn because I think they must shear the sheep at specific times of year and then they'll run out before the next year comes around. So yeah, I've got this to use very soon, and I will let you know how it goes. Another thing that I have acquired with my 3.5mm higher sharp tips was some hand spun merino silk and nylon wool. And let me just get out the bag. So this is by a lady called Chazoben Designs on Etsy. And this is her hand spun yarn, and whilst I was browsing for other potential things that I would like, I thought I would pick this up and maybe knit a hat out of it. It is 80% merino, 20% silk, and I think it's probably going to be DK to Aran weight, I imagine. 98 grams, 208 meters, so it's probably more like Aran weight yarn, possibly even bulky. But yeah, I thought it was really pretty. The colour just spoke to me, and I thought whilst I was buying those needle tips from her, I would also get some of this lovely yarn to try out. I'll link to her Etsy shop in the description below if you want to have a look. No particular plans for this so far, but just wanted to get this as well. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my hat challenge progress. So I do have a lot of hats that are sitting over here on the sofa with me. And I'm going to start dividing them up in the next week. So there'll be some that are smaller hats. They'll be going to a local charity to me. And my mum is going to be donating some hats to that charity as well for children who need kind of winter outfits, something to keep them warm in the winter, and I thought I'd donate a few of the ones that I had knit already to that charity. Then I also have a deadline of the 30th of November to send any hats for the homeless hats to the address that is quoted on the website. And then I will also be setting up a little sale website for donations to another charity that I haven't decided yet, and I'll do that in this coming week. So if I will share that link once I have it. It might not be before this episode goes live, but I need to work out the best way to do that and sort something out. It might be that I just end up sticking them on an Instagram account and saying, you know, let me know if you want them for this amount, and quoting the charity I'll be donating the money to. But I need to do a bit of dividing up and sorting out, which is great because I have a few days off this week. Perfect timing to do that, as well as do some tidying around the house. And that is everything I really wanted to talk to you about this week. Lots of casting on, some progress too, which I'm really happy about, and I'm sure I'll have way more to talk to you about in the next couple of weeks, as I'll be casting on one more sweater and probably a couple more hats in the meantime. Have a lovely crafty couple of weeks. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon. Bye!